Once upon a time, in a kingdom far away, there was a great king named Vikramaditya. He was known throughout the land for his bravery, wisdom, and just rule. People came from far and wide to seek his counsel and advice. One night, as King Vikramaditya was sleeping in his palace, he was awoken by a strange voice. He looked around but saw nothing. Then, the voice spoke again, calling out his name. The king was startled but composed himself and asked who was speaking. To his surprise, a sorcerer appeared before him. The sorcerer told the king that he had been summoned to bring him a corpse that hung from a tamarind tree in a nearby cremation ground. The sorcerer warned the king not to speak during their journey back, or else he would have to start all over again. King Vikramaditya was puzzled but obeyed the sorcerer's command. He set out for the cremation ground, where he found the corpse hanging from a tree. As he lifted the corpse, he heard a voice whispering, "King Vikramaditya, do not speak." As the king was carrying the corpse back, he felt a strange presence. Suddenly, a vampire came to life and began to talk to the king. The vampire was testing the king's knowledge, asking him riddles and posing difficult questions. The king answered the first riddle correctly, and the vampire flew away. This continued for several times. Each time the king answered the vampire's question, the vampire would fly away. The king was getting tired, but he was determined to finish the task. On the 23rd attempt, the vampire posed a particularly difficult question, and the king struggled to answer it. The vampire flew away once again, and the king went after him to retrieve the corpse. As the king approached the vampire, he saw that the corpse was gone. He asked the vampire where it was, but the vampire refused to tell him. Instead, he posed another question. This time, the king answered the question correctly, and the vampire revealed that he had been testing the king's wisdom and bravery. He was impressed by the king's answers and determination. The vampire revealed that the corpse they had been carrying was that of the sorcerer who had summoned the king. The sorcerer had been trying to trick the king into speaking so that he could possess his body. The vampire had been sent to test the king's wisdom and bravery. Impressed by King Vikramaditya's bravery and intelligence, the vampire offered to serve him as an advisor. The king agreed and the vampire became a trusted advisor to the king, helping him rule wisely and justly. Years passed, and the vampire remained by the king's side, guiding him in times of peace and war. The king's kingdom prospered, and his subjects were happy and content. However, the vampire grew old and weak, and he knew that his time was coming to an end. He went to the king and told him that he was going to die soon. The king was saddened by the news and asked the vampire if there was anything he could do to help him. The vampire replied that he wanted the king to promise him that he would not look at him when he died. The king was confused but agreed to the request. The vampire died that night, and the king kept his promise, not looking at him. However, the king was curious and wanted to know why the vampire had made such a request. He asked his advisors, but none of them knew the answer. Finally, he went to a wise sage who lived in the nearby mountains. The sage told the king that the vampire had made the request because he did not want the king to see him in his true form. The vampire had been cursed to live forever in his undead state and had been ashamed of his appearance. He did not want the king to be repulsed by his true form. The king was moved by the vampire's sadness and decided to honor his memory by erecting a monument in his honor. The monument depicted the vampire in his true form, and it served as a reminder of the vampire's loyalty and bravery. Years later, A traveler came to the kingdom and saw the monument. He asked the king who the vampire was and why he had been honored with a monument. The king told him the story, and the traveler was moved by the tale. He wrote down the story and carried it with him as he traveled to other lands. Eventually, the story of King Vikramaditya and the vampire spread throughout the world, and it became one of the most beloved tales of bravery and loyalty. And so, the memory of the vampire lived on, not as a fearsome creature of the night, but as a loyal and brave advisor to a great king. His memory was honored not because of his appearance or his strength, but because of his wisdom and his loyalty to his king. In the end, the story of King Vikramaditya and the vampire reminds us that true bravery and loyalty come not from our physical appearance or our strength, but from our wisdom and our willingness to serve others. It is a timeless tale that will continue to inspire and uplift people for generations to come.